Sure. Okay, great. Welcome everyone. My name is Shelley Ann Vidal. We've got Shalima here, Shalima Cambridge, and then Antonia as well as our guest. And thank you everyone for joining us today. As we get started, we want to Shalima, are we gonna do there we go. We want to take a moment to acknowledge the lands that we're on. We're joining from the traditional and unceded territorial land of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Kwantlen, Katsi, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen First Nations, who continually care for and sustain this land. So Shalima and I are both on this territory here. And just before we continue on, I would like to also just take a moment to invite you to think about whose land you are currently on right now and what that means to you being on the traditional lands of whichever nations you're on, and what that land has given you, offered to you. So just take a moment if you can and just think about that, reflect on that, because these lands allow us to sustain ourselves and our families and our friends. Just take a moment there. Thank you. All right. Shalima, do you want to go to the next one? Okay. So I'll actually invite you to do this part, Shalima, if you want.
So interesting. So as you told us to reflect, what I was actually thinking about is we just came home not too long ago, and the drive we take is quite scenic. We're very close to water, and I think just appreciation for having that access is so helpful in mental health, even like just, you know, some sanity around being able to see that as we are driving. And this really, in a way, can connect to why we're doing this work. It's creating spaces like this where we can connect and support our mental health by connecting with others who may have similar experiences, but also learning and providing us growth. And so that's a lot of the function when it comes to Kaiso careers. Our name, Kaiso, for those of you that aren't familiar yet, comes from the background of both Shelley and I. We're both of Trinidadian heritage. And Kaiso is a type of music that was developed during, with people that were enslaved at that time, to connect with each other, to communicate, even when they were being prevented from doing so. And so we thought it was a fitting name for us in this space to celebrate the opportunity to connect and build those connections, especially as we may not always see each other out in the world. And so how do we intentionally create that space? So that is a bit about our name. And Candid Career Convos, we actually are celebrating a whole year. So we started this January of last year, and you know, just a thought to create these spaces where we can connect, learn from each other, understand what experiences we're having, and validate some of those experiences as well. And yeah, it's a whole year now, so which is really, really cool. And so during that time, Shelley and I have also had some career changes. And so a bit about my background, my kind of mostly in leadership development, but have come from marketing communications background in the past too. Now exclusively focusing on supporting equity, diversity, and inclusion in organizations. I work for a company called HRX, and that's all we do. So that is where I'm immersed into at the moment. Shelley, how about you?
Sure, absolutely. So as Shalima mentioned, we had some career changes over the last year. I currently, I'm still at Langara College as an instructor in the Co-op and Career Services Department. I've also done some work within addressing anti-Black racism at Langara. I've also done consulting work at HRX and a few other organizations, and I'm currently on maternity leave. So that's another part of my career change and transition. So yeah, I'm excited to continue these conversations as it's been about a year. So yeah.
And so enough about us. It's now really to move on to our guests, and we're super excited to have Antonia on. I will just say that my daughter is, around the age where she can start participating in some of the programs that Antonia is putting on. And I was so excited for her to start getting to that age because she's just really doing amazing things. So we'll invite you, Antonia, to share a bit more about yourself, but we're super excited to have you and start this discussion with you. Beginning of the year, our first one of this year. So we'll hand it over to you, Antonia.
Oh my goodness. Thanks so much for having me. I'm calling from East Vancouver on the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I'm of Nigerian descent of the Yoruba people, and I grew up in Toronto, just outside Toronto, Mississauga. My career or who I am and myself, there's so many different aspects of it, but I'll start off with I'm a mom. I'm a mother to an amazing 14, soon to be 15-year-old girl. And I have my husband here. We both met in urban planning school. So I'm a trained urban planner as well. I did my master's in that and I did my undergrad in poli-sci. But now I am the founder of Ethos Lab, and we exist to empower youth to transform community and shift culture. And we do this by providing access to emerging technologies, networks, tools, and equipment in a culturally relevant context. And so our work centers the humanity of the Black experience in terms of its delivery, making sure Black youth feel respected, reflected, and protected. But it's a space that is open to all young people. And so we take an anti-racist approach whereby we just don't want any Black youth to be the only one in the room. And so you'll see a diversity of kids there, but at no point in time will a Black child feel like they're alone. And so we do that in leadership, and just in terms of our approach, we have a lot of Black youth that are involved in our programming, working with their diverse peers. I can share so much more, but I think it will all come out in the conversation.
It definitely will.
We definitely want to get into, what kind of got you to this space, because as you mentioned, you have a varied background, and I think that's great. Like, that's important to build the types of experiences you have and bring that into whatever next stage it is that you're having in this moment. And so I would love to hear a bit about that journey. But one thing I didn't realize was that you are from Toronto. So coming here might have been a bit of a culture shock. And I'm curious about that actually. What was it like actually coming to Vancouver and kind of setting up shop and seeing what's needed here for the community?
Yeah, that's a really indeed, it is a huge culture shock. It was a culture shock in that in growing up in the GTA, in fact, I didn't meet a multi-generational Black Canadian until I was 28. Most people are new immigrants or first gen. And so to have the deep history here that's so connected to this area was really amazing to me. And so when you are in Toronto, people ask you where you're from, and it's immediately I'm Nigerian. And then when I moved out here to Vancouver, and people asked me where I was from, and I didn't realize it. I was just like, yeah, I'm from Toronto. And they're like, no, but where are you really from? And so that was really interesting. And it started really bringing up for me, what does identity, what does the Canadian identity mean to me? Who am I? And things like that, which really started some of the work that I did here in really addressing that question about where I'm from. So that was one thing. There are definitely a lot less Black people here in general. So being of Nigerian descent and being in Toronto, I was part of the Nigerians in Diaspora organization. I was part of the Yoruba Association. I was part of the Nigerian Youth and Diaspora Association. I'm part of the Ekitikete Association. You could go all the way down and you'd still have a large group of people here. But here it's very much, small pockets of different communities. And so it is just very different because you can really find yourself just in the Nigerian community in Toronto and just be fine. But oftentimes you'd intersect a lot with Caribbean cultures. But I will say this, despite there being a small population, I actually felt it was quite freeing to be here in Vancouver with a small Black population. And I'm going to be a bit vain here. It's because there were so few, I could let my hair braids go out a bit longer and no one say anything, where I wouldn't walk the streets like that in Toronto. But also in the sense that there's a, you know, it's so small, so there's just a lot of opportunities for everybody to come together. So being a part of BIV and then having this like annual like, hey, Black people, let's come together and take a picture. Like that's not something that would happen in Toronto. Like that's not
Yeah.
it's just it's small enough. So there is a lot of opportunity here in and in talking to other urban planners, small to medium sized cities where there are like these vibrant movements that are happening with Black communities because they are so small, so they can kind of come together. So I think that that's a strength of it as of kind of being out here. So that's what I thought.
Yeah, I can definitely agree that I don't know, like I've always thought that maybe I might not be able to handle Toronto in terms of like having to keep myself looking a certain way. Because I guess in my head, the standards are so much higher.
There's more people to hold you accountable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's the vanity of it all. But otherwise, yeah.
In terms of, you know, you mentioned how when you came here, you saw an opportunity to kind of delve into your identity and, you know, allow that to kind of grow some of the interests that you may have had. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so when I first moved here, from the GTA, I felt I did feel like quite alone. I didn't know anybody. It was still fairly new to me, and I would wake up really early so I could still listen to Metro Morning, so I could still like read the Toronto Star. Like I was really back home, and I would wake up and stay up late just to like talk to my friends back home. And then I realized there was a switch for me where it's like, this is where I am now, and I really want to like be here. And I actually made a very conscious decision, like of making this a home for me, and kind of drawing from my entrepreneurial kind of mindset, was like, well, there are a lot of things that are missing here, or not necessarily like things that I'd like to do, and then I'm just going to do it and put it on. And it wasn't I had been a part of many different conversations. Everybody kind of knows about this whole like Vancouver no fun city, or like nothing happens here, which I feel is, you know, you really actually have an opportunity to make a change here. So there's a lot of still potential, and so I felt that yeah, I really wanted to make it my home, and so I just kind of dove into different projects, things that I was interested in, that in Toronto, because of some of the things that I had done back there, there's just so much more of a hustle culture here. Here you can like take the time, be inspired, and try something new. And again, we will probably dig into some of that. And I don't know how much you want me to like, I don't know if questions will come directly about, you know, whether it be Hogan's Alley or whether it be Ethos Lab and others. But otherwise, started to think kind of bigger and use my imagination and try and implement or do different things that really stretched who I was, to be able to grow. And I got to meet a lot of amazing people along the way, like Joanne, who's on the call. So I'm really excited to talk about that.
I'm glad that you brought up that whole idea of back east, it being such a hustle and bustle. I lived in Toronto for a year, and I definitely found that energy was just like fast paced, go, 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 go. And then when I returned here, I definitely found that things were a little slower, a little more calm, and you had that maybe mind space to plan it out a little different, whatever you wanted to execute. So I'm glad that you touched upon that. And I mean, that leads me to wonder, like, what planted this whole seed of like Ethos Lab? Because what you're doing in Ethos Lab is phenomenal. And again, your background is in urban planning, poli-sci, and then Ethos Lab. Like, where, like, how did it all come together? How did that ethos all come just like and be?
Yeah, I think it's a convergence of many different experiences. I mean, to start where Ethos Lab came from, beyond just like the inspiration of having a daughter, it was just really looking back at my life. My first entrepreneurial gig was selling necklaces at my in my mom's office to coming up with different stories and plays that I would put on for kids. And, just I was always doing many different things outside of a regular stream. So whether it be like school, and I'd always do something on the side, to like work, I'd always do something on the side. And so number one inspiration was like, okay, I want to actually go all in for the first time in my life, and just be focused on it. Not this is something on the side. The other thing is while I'm a career urban, not career, like a trained urban planner, I'm a career disaster planner. I've been planning for disasters for the last 18 years. I quit just before the pandemic. Mind you, a big part of my portfolio was pandemic planning as well. And but while in Ontario, I was part of major responses to forest fires, floods, and business continuity planning, and making sure the government was resilient. I then went back to school to do urban planning as my master's after 8 years of being a professional emergency manager. And then I consulted with D&D, Department of National Defense, doing, military exercises and all that stuff. But on the side, I would also do, I worked on a political campaign, or I would also managed a hip hop artist for a period of time. And I would also, volunteer in my church. So I was always involved in community. And so there would be times where I would go to the office and work, and then I would drive 5 hours for a hip hop concert, or go on a tour. I take, my vacation days were going on tour, and then I'd go back and it'd be like, oh, what'd you do on the weekend? Oh, I did about 5 hip hop shows with an artist or whatever, right? And these were just things that and experiences that I really enjoyed, and just kind of followed my passion. And then, but again, being a disaster planner, you're able to see things, years ahead. So to see that this was happening, our current situation, whether it be the social situations that we're in, to different political movements, to also the pandemic, climate change, especially being one of them. Again, I also identify as a resiliency professional. That the issue around the deep underrepresentation of Black youth and girls in STEM fields, is a disaster waiting to happen. We're at a really critical point in our humanity, where the digital future is being built very clearly in reports, in documentation, by white males. We all know this. There is so much research about that, and there's a lot of research as well about the barriers that contribute to that. And I've kind of reached a point, and while there's a lot of research and data that we're still trying to figure out, and I get these invitations like, hey, can you do the survey? I'm like, the research is there. Let's just try something out in terms of what the solutions are and iterate upon it. And so one of the, in looking at some of the research, it said, in particular for Black youth, in order to create that sustained experience and getting into STEM, was actually a supportive community. And so that's what we do. This isn't just a program where you just come in and learn how to code and just like straight skill building. It's actually a persistent community that you can plug into. And we identify as innovators, we identify as creators. And so if you are a part of Ethos Lab, you are those things. And so some of these kids will be like, oh, I'm not smart enough for STEM, or I'm not. If you join Ethos Lab, you're just a part of a group of people that already have the mentality and the confidence to assume that type of identity. And that's where we want to, that's the first step. Then you start learning all the different technical skills and seeing, oh, what are the different possibilities that are out there. But unless you're able to capture and create that supportive community, not just with adults, but with your peers, like your peers that aren't necessarily Black, but like, you might have someone who's Filipino or white or whatever it might be, outside of an Ethos Lab environment, they're the ones that are influencing your behavior day to day. They're the ones that might say like, oh, you got a good mark, like, but that doesn't make, or, oh, you're Black, you're supposed to smoke weed, or you're supposed to do this. It's really want to create an environment where even their peer, that they're able to be leaders amongst their peers, and feel and also feel supported in being that way, and that the peers themselves also are able to see Black leaders in these different spaces. So all the kids in Ethos Lab, you can't say like in your high school career you were never taught by a Black person. Like that 100%, all these kids have experienced a diversity of Black leadership. and all have gained value from it, not just in certain situations. So that was a big inspiration, was creating that type of environment for my daughter, because I saw that there wasn't equitable access to innovation in STEM. So you'd have to be a part of like a specialized program. We're just kind of having this conversation. You have to shell out money on some really great schools or whatever. And I'm like, do you know that these things are actually free and they just need to be curated in a culturally relevant way to make it attractive? And so we have debate. The National Society of Debate and Argumentation. I think that's what the acronym. But he's Black, and he's the leader, and he's based in Vancouver. And we're like, great, we're integrating a debate program, so the kids learn how to critically discuss these issues around STEM. And at the same time, we teach them STEM skills as well. So you're going to have those conversations, and you're also going to learn how to build. And the kids that are part of Ethos Lab, some of them are just like, I really hate STEM. And then you tell them, hey, can you help me code something? And they're like, sure, I'll go ahead and do it. Because they haven't like grounded that identity of like, oh, this is what a STEM kid is. It's a tool for them to be able to achieve whatever vision they want to build in the world around them. That's a long-winded way of just saying I just wanted to make it a little different than it is out there.
I love it.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the kind of switch and roll from, I see what the people in this area, in this field look like, and I need to fit into what that identity is, to me being here creates what that identity should be. So by me being present, I've now created what it means to be and look like in STEM. Yeah,
and in particular, like just kind of building off that, there are a lot of great STEM programs, and there are a lot of great people doing really good work in the STEM field. And there are definitely Black organizations that are really focusing on, particular areas for bringing STEM to Black youth. And I think that there just needs to be more of that in terms of Black leadership in bringing STEM, again, not just to Black youth, but like actually Black academics, intellect is something that needs to be seen by non-Black kids, because they don't see it at all. And so when you come, I think that that's also the other half of the issue, is that, the Mark Zuckerbergs or whatever of the world, yeah, you know what, they had a Black kid in their class that they maybe spoke to, but perhaps had friends or such, but like they actually just didn't see any Black leaders that would validate, oh, like Black people are in these types of positions consistently, not just in February, they're there and they're contributing, and so I believe that I want to be able to, I made a decision also in my life where I wanted to really focus on supporting the Black community, understanding and actually hearing from different parents as we did interviews, that they wanted their kids to have these skills, but didn't necessarily want it also in Black only environments. And so I think that there needs to be affinity groups where we do that in Ethos Lab, where it is Black only, but also at the same time, they just want their kids to feel respected, valued, dignified in a space, and be able to learn with their peers as well. And especially being very small population, you're only more likely to do things with your friends, and your friends, if you're the only Black kid in class, your friend is probably not Black. They're probably from another culture. And so you want to bring them along and do some. And so there has been situations where a non-Black kid will come to Ethos Lab and bring their Black friend in, right? Like, so I think that there's many different ways that you can come to STEM. It's just that we need to really, I think Ethos Lab is just kind of taking another approach and then connecting in with other organizations to be able to help, bring this community together, because we do see ourselves as an ecosystem, not necessarily just the thing.
As you were sharing that, thank you. And you mentioned, the affinity groups and kind of opening it up. It reminded me of, and Shalima knows this because we both grew up here, many years ago, there was the Junior Black Achievement Awards,
I've
and
heard
that,
about this thing.
yeah,
I've heard
yeah,
about it.
and that was an opportunity for us as youth to see Black excellence, as far as in academics, in community service, in the arts, in all different areas, right? And so, as you mentioned, Ethos Lab, I just, have this kind of reflection or flashback of those moments where, as youth, we would be able to connect with other youth from different cities, just coming together and seeing them excel in all different areas of life. And it was just normal. It wasn't like, oh, you are, a Black da 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 da. It's like, no, we're just a student who's really good at this, or I'm just a community member who's really good at this. And just normalizing it. And yes, it's kind of like this affinity group, but it wasn't like, it just, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be. I do appreciate and value like Black excellence in language, but I also just like I want a solid B student in Ethos Lab. You know what I mean? Like that's not afraid to create, learn things because that's just all you need. And oftentimes the opportunities, like if I was a solid B student, if someone gave me just a small opportunity, that might have been for someone who had like higher grades, like who knows what the possibilities could have been. And it's not that grades, I'm not saying grades don't matter. My daughter would definitely tell you that otherwise, like I definitely think differently about that. But what I'm trying to say is that all young people, if they are curious and want to learn and just if they just even have a little bit of curiosity, I'm like, let's feed it. Let's just give them as much as possible. So much of us as parents, not or even just like teachers, is like, oh, that kid is really good in math, and so they must be. So I have to send them to that conference. Whereas there might be that kid that's really quiet, maybe doesn't have the greatest marks because their English mark might not be good, and so they're not necessarily getting the STEM invitations to these conferences or events. And I'm just saying, like, let's blow this wide open. If a kid's really interested in it, or not even really interested in it, that we're like, oh, there are several parts of your character that if we put the pieces together, let's give you this opportunity. It's either you pick it up or you put it down. And I tell my daughter, find all the things that you don't enjoy doing, so when you get older, you'll get even closer to the things that you do like doing. And that's what we're really about.
Yeah, absolutely. Opportunities, right? Opening up the doors to what's possible out there. As Razi was saying, the options, what are the options, and knowing that there are options, because oftentimes we don't know what we don't know, right? So until someone says, oh, have you tried this or have you seen this? Then you're like, okay, I never even imagined exploring, whatever it is that's out there, because we don't know, we don't know.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, like, so for example, and again, I talk about Black excellence and marks not necessarily mattering, but we have this young person who was part of Ethos Lab, an Ethosian, that's what we call them, and he applied for computer science at Harvard, and he got in. And so they call him Harvard Boy, or it's just like they just have a name for him now. And but like you've got like 12-year-olds now being like, oh, I'm gonna go to Harvard. I want to be like him. And like it just made a huge difference. Where he was like, oh, I applied to all these different schools and I didn't get into this one, or I did this one and this is what I did. And the kid's just like, wow, I can think about that as well. And the other thing was he would be in like 3D modeling classes with the kids and struggling alongside with them, right? And this kid's going to Harvard? Wait, what? So I think even just like give it that proximity to opportunity, proximity to people that are ambitious or like trying different things, I think makes a really big difference. And so I've had some kids are hearing back from parents that their kids have said to them, the kids in Ethos Lab are really nice and like really smart. Am I smart? Like that, like starting to actually begin to internalize and think about it. And we're just like, we've done workshops on failure. Like we've wanted them to fail, and it's all about trying, creating those opportunities, building their portfolio of experiences so that they can get to where they want to go. So for example, the kid that got into Harvard referenced Ethos Lab and his experience in Ethos Lab. And that's what we want to be able to do and other kids that have been, applying to private schools as well, we write, we've been writing reference letters to support them and like, hey, this kid is able to do this or this, or they're interested. So it's just a safe place where they're able to, again, learn and gather these experiences, because that's what's it about. That's what it's about, and less about, again, like that B plus on that socials exam. It's like, have you ever done X? Have you ever done Y? Really gets you forward.
I think, we kind of talked about like, well, about grades, and I, coming from
which are important,
and like, coming from the background that I come from, like my parents also were all about the grades too. But I like that part of this is, not everyone is going to have those grades, but they may have other skills that are going to actually benefit the field of STEM, and you need that diversity of thought to be able to propel innovation in any given field. And so, when a kid can see themselves doing work or challenging themselves, enduring failure and being able to push through that and think about things in a different way, even though they may not be traditionally pegged as what is a STEM kid.
Exactly.
Being able to be in that space, and for other people to see the benefits of having people that may not be that traditional mold for a field as well. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm curious about, because, when I think about the work that you're doing with kids and, with youth and getting them to understand themselves in this space, I think this is so translatable to adulthood. Like if I could have had programs like that, like when I was a youth, building that extra muscle of being in a space that, like, quite frankly, I'm probably not a STEM kid. That probably would not have been my background, but being able to challenge myself in that area is so key, and being able to try new things is so important as well. How would you relate like the work that you're doing with the youth in terms of trying new things, being innovative, challenging yourself, leaning into curiosity to your own career pattern, and like how you, approach to career that might be also kind of diverse too? Like,
no, absolutely. I mean, I'm relentlessly curious. Like that, I think is I was like my problem at first, because you start thinking about like what's wrong with me. Why can't I just like focus on like one thing? I mean, again, with emergency planning being like that straight stream, emergency management, by the way, is just such a diverse field in the sense that like I would be managing a tornado to like ice storms, like, I'd be working and then I have to drop everything. So it was very dynamic. And so it worked for my curious mind. And so I think for myself right now, or especially with getting into Ethos Lab, it was like, how far can this curiosity go? And in which sense, like how can I build something? I'm usually a bit of a more of a like a sprinter, inspirational kind of thing, where I can do something for a period of time and then I kind of lose interest. And so what so from my own personal journey, it's really about how can like really digging in and building something that can grow and create a legacy. Like I'm wearing our Ethos Lab shirt.
Yes.
And putting established 2020, like to make it very clear that this is going somewhere. Like this is that there was a starting point, and we want to like it to be something. And Joanne, who's on the call or whatever, was there from 2019. Joanne has been a part of this Ethos Lab journey for longer than I think they even want to admit. But just it's always about curious and how we can as a community, different ways to help just Black empowerment. Like I was growing so exhausted by having the same conversations every single year, and then hearing my daughter have the same conversations. I was like, this when do we just say it's enough? Like, let's do something differently. And when you do things to the left, people don't really get it as well. So it's also very difficult to describe what Ethos Lab is to people as well. But it's I just really want to try. I just really want to do something different, and then that's where kind of for me where and how kind of my relentless curiosity kind of brought me to this point. And then I'll just add one more thing is like I am not a STEM kid. I grew up and I had intentions of doing marine biology and then realized you need to have grades that are higher than 75% in your like class in biology class. And so I had applied for marine biology, and when it came to applying to universities, I applied for poli sci because I was very interested in politics. And I think around that time too, I was part of a lot of different movements around like US imperialism, globalization, or whatever with Bush. And before Bush, I was like out on the streets, and I went to University of Ottawa where we protest literally every single day. So I realized that that was the space that I really wanted to be in. And but my father's an engineer, my sister's an engineer, my other sister's a doctor, and then the other one, my brother did kinesiology, and he's in insurance, and I did poli sci. And I think everybody has their own gifts, and I realized my gift is the ability to bring people together, the ability to kind of see or like vision, and be audacious enough to actually go forward with it. And so a lot of my work was, who am I to start a STEM organization without being in STEM? And what I would actually say for a lot of places where systems need to change, it's the people from the outside that come in to change things up. I'll give another analogy. When I was working in the music industry and managing an artist, I was working for the government, right? That's what I understood, and I had worked again for political campaigns. But and then my other kind of co-manager, whatever, he worked for a marketing company, and none of us were in the music industry, right? We weren't A&Rs, we weren't marketing promoter, whatever. But we just came up with the most wild things. And people were like, what are these guys doing? And now the artist is a Juno Award winning artist, right? And it takes, I think, people to just be audacious enough and just believe in something enough to be able to say it's up to me or us to change how this is going, even though it may not look like we're the ones that should do it. And oftentimes, as Black people, it's like we don't look like the part to be able to do different things. And so I think really just stepping into that space where someone might not see us doing different actions, and in some ways that's a bit ninja like. That means that, you know what, I can make some movements. There's a strong ethos within the community of being able to shift culture, of being able to create community. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us just digging into our own culture to be able to change the way things are happening around us. And I would just add one more thing here, is just that there's an expectation as a Black leader that I would create a STEM organization focused on Black youth, which means it's for Black youth. And I'm like, the actual system that needs to change is that non-Black people need to not be afraid to be taught by Black people. Non-Black people need to be okay with my like to learn STEM beside my daughter and not just play basketball with my daughter. And so I think us, like even just me stepping into this space and saying, we're actually just trying to change the way this whole thing is done. And that actually helps everybody. I'm not neglecting or not trying to whitewash and say that it's like it's not for Black people. I feel like it undoubtedly I'm doing this for Black people, like, and this has been a part of the conversation, but our peers need to see that we're changing things. We can change the whole system. And so that's been a challenge actually with like grants. It's been a challenge with accessing or people perceiving it. Like, how can you do something for Black people, but it includes other people? Like, it's a fundamental question, because they just expect, if you're doing it for Black people, just, well, if, you know, it's the same thing. If I'm going to create something for girls, we need to address toxic masculinity. Like, that's, so I think you need to include all of these things. You need to include gender fluid kids. You need to include people from different backgrounds in order to address these things at a systems level. And so that was where I was going left with like, oh, you're doing something for Black people, but it includes other kids. And so it's really hard to apply for grants, you know, when they say, how are you helping Black people? But wait, your picture, it doesn't make any sense. So.
Oh, wow.
This is beautiful, wonderful, amazing. I love it. Yes, Jesus, keep preaching. Absolutely. One of the themes that kind of came up as you were talking about being just basically being bold and going out there is that idea of kind of taking that risk. And what advice do you have to our audience, to folks who want to do these things but are just scared, nervous, right? Because you really have to be bold to go kind of against the grain of what this society is doing and saying and being. Right, like you're saying, it's a mind bend for some folks. Like you said, you're creating this space for Black folks, and at the same time, it's inclusive. It's not just for Black people, right? So, what advice do you have for again our audience in how to take these risks, to be bold when they just may not feel like they can?
Yeah, I think
Access audacity.
Yes.
Like audacity is the big thing, like being audacious. It's one of my favorite. Yeah, I think Barack Obama has that book, like The Audacity of Hope. And so the risk thing, it's really funny because I believe I'm risk averse, like extremely risk averse. And Ethos Lab was not. Oh, Ethos Lab was like. First, I'll say this. I marinate on things for a while, a long time before I take the first step. And there is a gentleman by the name of Matt Hearn, who is part of Solid State Community Industries, where Ethos Lab was incubated out of. Because I kind of went to him and I said, I've been thinking about like creating a black-led cooperative, and this is what I'm thinking it would be. And I'd been marinating on it, blah, blah, blah. And then Matt actually emailed me and he said, there's this grant. I think you can get it. I think you could probably get a lot of money for it. And I was like, I don't know. He's like, I'll finish the grant. If you get it, you can decide whether or not you. And I was like, I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. We got the grant. Oh God, I have to do this thing. So that's basically, how it kind of like start, because the other thing, again, all the things I do on the side or whatever, like my husband and I own a gallery called the Cheeky Proletariat on Carroll Street. And we had reached a point where I was like, I'm doing on the side. We'll just have different artists in. It'll be fine. And people were coming in. Until I actually did an inventory and we had 80 artists go through our gallery in a number. I was like, whoa, wait a second. This is a thing. And so my intention was like, okay, well, let me grow the Cheeky, get comfortable. It's something small or whatever. But then, Matt, so in terms of taking risks, having someone who is there to like having a supportive community is number one. And having someone, a champion who's beside you that believes in you. And that was Matt for me in being able to put that forward. And so I'll say this with regards to youth, and in particular Black youth, is that there is a fear of taking risks because you're afraid of that is something I've observed through Ethos Lab in relationship to their peers. Like it's shocking to me. And so it's just being able to, you need an environment around you that allows you to be comfortable in who you are and non-judgmental and supportive. So I can never say that I've just I innately have taken risks. It's that the conditions around me and the people that have been around me have allowed me to believe that I can take the next step because I knew I had a strong foundation. So I definitely am an overthinker in many ways, but I marinate a lot before so I have a number of different ideas and enterprises and things that I'm already thinking of, that when I do it, someone might be like, whoa, that's a huge risk. Well, I've been thinking about this thing for 5 years or 6 years or my whole life. And definitely an entrepreneurial jump has been something that I've been marinating for a number of years in my life. So when I started Ethos Lab, people that knew me were like, oh, I'm not surprised. Obviously. And my mom being one of them was like, I'm really my mom who passed away just before I started all of this, had said to me, like, I don't understand why you're not an entrepreneur. Like, this isn't,
Mm.
why are you still working for someone else? Like, she had really depended on me starting something, and she would work with me, and so I knew in 2019 I would make that jump, or 2020, in 2020 I would make that jump. Um, or sorry, 2019. I kind of started the thinking around that, and then she passed away in 2019, and I started Ethos Lab in 2020.
Wow.
I think, you know, you're kind of raising that idea of the people around you really can shape what you see as possible for yourself. And whether it's your mom believing in you and, you know, kind of like asking that question, like, why aren't you doing this? You need those people to like kind of recognize what is possible for you and push you, ask those questions, like, why aren't you doing this? Like, we can see what you can do. So let's see how you can get there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the people that are going to hold you up, right? When you don't necessarily see yourself for your true power and worth, when you have those supporters or champions around you to really just, again, hold you up, I think it's key. And as Shalima and I've talked about in some of our other training, it's that kind of the board of directors, who's on your board of directors, right?
Yeah.
To champion whatever it is that you may be thinking about but not sure of. And yeah,
And it's an extremely vulnerable place to be. You know, I'm kind of out there, and you're just kind of like, oh, let's see how this goes, and you know, and again, just hearing from the different parents and also from the kids, like it's transformative what we're hearing, and it's just like, just want more kids to be involved. I'd love to have more kids in the community to be involved. But I'll just want to come back to again that risk question, and also some of the further inspiration around this. I'm really inspired by Martin Luther King. We had the Martin Luther King Day, and I watched the documentary that was in the wilderness. I don't know if you've ever had this opportunity to watch that documentary, where you know, Martin Luther King, again, really talking about like Black initiatives being really about bringing the Black community up 100, and only focusing just on the Black community, which it is, like, you know, or Black only. What Martin Luther King was really focused on that. Martin Luther King went up to the north and was like lambasted by the Black community up in the north. After his "I Have a Dream" speech, there was, you know, he was really talking about economic reform in many different ways. And it wasn't until he started talking about the Vietnam War that he actually became a threat, something that impacted everybody, because he wasn't staying in his lane anymore. And I think that, like, and so he was taking a risk. And many times he wanted to talk about it, and people were telling him, I don't know about this. That's everybody, you know. And I think that I think that there needs to be that level of vulnerability in actually making the systems change. And so I really looked at the work of Martin Luther King and understood what was at stake for him. And I was like, you know what, like, that's kind of the path that I'd like to take in the impact that I make. So I mean, I'm part of Ethos Lab, or leading Ethos Lab, but I'm also on the UBC Board of Governors, and I really want to be able to change how we think about higher education. And in thinking about that governorship, I was like, oh, I don't know, should I be that? Like, I've never done this before, right? Like, UBC is like a city, you know? I've never done that. And the person that I consulted you know, on whether or not I should do it, said to me, be there long enough for someone else to think that they could do it as well. And if that's my purpose while I'm there, then that's my purpose. But to sit around the table with all the heads of the Black Students Associations, whether it be legal or whatever, and them saying, I've never, ever seen this before, is just enough for me to feel like I'm making the change that I'd like to make in this world.
Wow. Be there long enough to ensure that someone else could see that they can be there. I love that.
Me too. That's powerful.
Yeah.
We'll
see.
Check in.
I'll be there for another couple years, so it's all good.
I just want to check in to see, like, if any thoughts are coming up for anyone who's listening in, because I know we have people from all different backgrounds who've done all types of different work and have taken some risks in their life too. So I'd love to just check in to see what's resonating with people, either like pop it in the chat, or if you want to come off mute and share something, we'd love to hear from you. I'm really good with silence, so I can go on.
Oh, there we go. I was going to say while we're waiting. Okay, go ahead. Let's see what this says.
So how do you navigate your inner voice critic when it goes against the external support and validation of your communities? Extra. I think that's a really good question. Let me turn it over to you, Antonia.
What a question. What a question. How do I navigate my inner voice? I'm navigating my inner voice all the time. I will say this. I'm a Christian, and that has been a lot of what's helped me is like just refocusing to the word. That's been really helpful. And so that's one thing, is just finding that foundation of scripture and spirit, or anything that I can meditate on that gets my mind off of it. I have to say, like, if anyone kind of looks closely at me at any different time during the day, I mutter, I am enough, I am enough. I say that quite a bit to myself. Or you're good, like you're good. And I just kind of like talk to myself. So I kind of talk myself up, and I listen to a lot of like just hype music to like boost myself up. So that often just like drowns out the inner voice. And then I have my I have my husband who helps me out. But where I may not have other like my people around me to speak into my life or whatever, I always just like come back to like my family. My family is my rock, my foundation, and I think of ancestors, like really my ancestors, where we've come from. That helps. And then in terms of like validation from your communities, I think we I've really we've said this before. We don't see Blackness as like a monolith. We're all like a diverse group or set of people. Like it's really interesting. We just did an urban planning competition, which I hope the kids win. They said if we get the $10,000, we're all buying Jordans, and I was like, sure, yeah, like Jordans, that's totally fine. But there's a $10,000 cash prize on the table that these kids have just like worked their butts off for, which is awesome. And it was very interesting. The Black youth it was divided into design and art and policy. All the Black youth did policy. All the Black youth were the writers of the report versus the design. And sometimes we have like different perspectives. So I get often a lot of like arts groups saying like, hey, we'll do like arts or whatever. And I'm like, these kids are writers. These kids they're cerebral, and they're competitors, And so when it comes to like support and like validation from communities, I just accept that we're a diversity, a group of people, that not everyone's going to be down with what I'm doing. Sometimes it hurts when you think about it, when you're like, why aren't there more Black youth, wanting to do this? Though we talk about it, but I just know if you kind of stay the course, hopefully things will change, or hopefully things will be the way. But there's definitely a lot more depth tied to that. It does impact me, but I know that I'm enough.
I'm seeing Lindsay's comment about the appreciation and vulnerability, and I think that's so important to be able to see that. And I iterate that exact same appreciation in you sharing your story here, Antonia. And I think it's something that we can all kind of take in for ourselves to challenge ourselves to be vulnerable and share our vulnerable stories, because that's where people see themselves. We may, have that desire to put up that front of, yeah, I'm doing it, I'm good, right? Like that gassing ourselves up to be able to take on those challenges. But at the same time, we do all, I would think, have those moments where we are questioning ourselves, and sharing those moments with others allows them to see like, okay, that's normal. I can question myself too, but I can also achieve in the same way that this person is doing, like push through that just the same. Yeah.
Awesome. As we're just getting closer to wrapping up, maybe we should ask our
This has been like the best
question.
I do a lot of these different things. So I'm like, no. We got another 2 hours in us, Shelley.
Well, and
You probably do.
That's exactly it, right? When we think about these conversations and how rich they are and how needed they are. Again, this is why Shalima and I are doing what we're doing. We wanted to be able to hold a space where we could have these conversations. Just start it. We know that they're deeper and they can go longer, and we could talk for days. And we know that people appreciate it, right? Because people are now being seen and heard, right? Even if they're not speaking, our audience isn't speaking out loud, they're being seen, they're being heard. And that's part of why we're doing what we're doing. So before we wrap up, we'll just ask our signature question that we ask every episode, every month. So we want to know, would you consider yourself a fast wine,
slow wine,
a red wine,
or white wine?
And why?
I think I'm more of I'm probably more of a slow wine. Probably more of a slow wine.
Okay.
Okay. As you marinate on your thoughts.
as I marinate on my thoughts, I'm a bit of a slow wine.
Nice.
I love it.
I'm a no wine.
Okay.
I don't drink.
Okay. So awesome. Definitely the slow wine. Love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think I'm a slow wine these days. In between a little red wine or white wine. Whatever.
That's so fun. I really appreciate coming. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope to connect with all of you on the call at some point in time. I hope we get to cross paths again. And if I could just leave one, I guess, small piece of advice is just lean into who you are and don't be afraid of it. Half of our lives is really about being afraid of being our authentic selves. And I think we want to just be able to, I just want to be able to be as true to that as possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Where can people connect with you in case they're curious?
People can reach out to me directly at Antonia at ethoslab.ca.
Awesome.
If you want to email me, otherwise, if you have any teens, or even ones close to teens, I'm looking at you, Shalima. If you have any teens that are really interested in just being a part of a community that is doing some awesome stuff, we got internships happening, we got partnerships with EA, got summer jobs that are starting. We're doing the thing, and
we're blowing up.
we're blowing up, and right now we're only accepting 50 kids, and so we just want to be able to focus our efforts on these kids, create a solid experience, and then scale from there. So if you know anyone between the ages of 12 to 18, Black or non-Black, we are looking at, again, growing introducing Black youth to STEAM. And girls, if you have any girls that are really interested in just hanging out, we have a lot of girls at Ethos Lab, which is awesome. Bring them out and just shoot me an email.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Antonia. Thank you to our audience. We're so glad that you have joined us today. As we kick off this year, we're excited to continue these conversations every month. The third Friday of the month during your lunch hour, join us and enjoy the rest of your day and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.